as I open up to be an expression of your unfolding peace. Show, Spirit, show through me as I open up to be an expression of your unfolding love. Your unfolding peace, and show, Spirit, show through me as I open up to be an expression of your unfolding love.
Good evening. Welcome to our Midweek Faithless. My name is Shannon Brun. Today is November 16th. I'm joined here by Rev Doug Werth. Good evening, Rev Doug. I haven't seen you in a while.
Yeah, it's been a while.
It's been a while. What's going on, bro? I haven't seen you.
Well,
I mean, I know last week you weren't here because you were having some things done.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
You were having some work done on your, work like Botox or some stuff?
No.
No Botox?
No.
You were having work done on your house.
Work done on the house. Yeah. No, it's all contractors and that sort of thing. So every now and then I.
Yeah. And I've been having some work done here.
Yeah, that's nice.
It looks like for me, I see it as prosperity.
Yeah.
I've been benefiting from some things, and I see that I can get some things done, and I see that as prosperity. Is that prosperity when you can?
I think so.
Yeah. Okay.
Cool. And for me, a lot of what my makeup is I want things in order. Okay. Fully functional, looking nice, that sort of thing. I don't like to be surrounded by anything that's not working or needs repairs or things like that. So
that comes from your manufacturing background, I'm sure.
Well,
you've run plants for 20 years or something.
Yeah, 30 or so. Yeah, that's true. And the other aspect of that is typically you bring. Who you are, your character, the things that you bring that to the types of jobs that you do. Wow. So you bring that skill set or that inclination to what you do, and then that goes out, throughout the rest of your life. So I think it's all just part and parcel of the way I look at things.
So you've had the roof done and some other things. And,
we had the roof done, painted the house. We have a dehumidifier down in the basement that had to be all redone. Just got done putting in a brand new septic tank.
Your house looks brand new. As far as the color,
nice.
Because it used to be like a green or yellow.
It was yellow,
bright yellow. Yeah. Now you got this bluish. Red.
Well, it's a gray.
A gray.
Okay, with black shutters and then a white trim that runs all around. It looks pretty nice.
I think it looks really nice.
Yeah.
It stands out.
Yeah.
It stood out before. Yellow, but it's really nice. I really like it. Yeah. You guys are doing great work over there. But that's why you weren't here last week.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. The contractors were supposed to finish up on Tuesday, and
you know how it goes.
Yeah. That just happened. So. And I wanted to be there while they were finishing up the work. So
Well, welcome back. Welcome back. And
Thanks.
We had a Sunday service last week, and you talked about faith.
Yes.
And I wanted to get a little bit into that today
Sure.
in the podcast.
Okay.
Get a little bit into that whole sermon. So you define faith for us. Can you define it?
Well, it actually comes from a scriptural reading, which is in Hebrews chapter 11, first verse. And they believe that it's, some scholars believe the Apostle Paul is writing that. Others say no, but whatever. But it's faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. And there's a few more verses with that, but that's the essential part of it. And what they're saying about faith is that there's a conviction in there that when you say something or when you go out to do something, you can actually accomplish that. And faith is the assurance of things hoped for. You know, hope is kind of it's a vision, it's something you'd like to have, but there's no strength behind it. When you put strength behind it, and by strength I mean spiritual strength, when you put strength behind something like that, you're assured that it's going to happen. And you can step up and you can go.
So when you said that during service, it caught my attention, because it's like, it's not just hope, bro. You got to have more than hope when you want something. So if you just got hope, you're not going to get it. What you're saying is, and what the verse is saying is, you got to have a assurance, and a conviction, which is much more stronger, which is in that one of those 12 powers. It's about strength in there. So you broke it down really you're like a metaphysician, man.
Well,
that's a breakdown.
Exactly. In other words, on a Sunday morning, I don't want to get up there and be all fluff.
Right.
Okay. And you gotta believe. No. In other words, if we're talking about how do we make our life better, not only in this world, this material world, but in our relationships, in the things that we want to create in our life, and also in the next world. How do we do that? All right. So what I'm all about is giving people tools, and the more and the longer I'm in this, I hate to say business, okay, but in this creative search, I think is a better way of looking at it. The more I do this, and the more things that I read, not only in current psychology and in current scientific material, and there's a lot of other people in other disciplines out there who are looking at the same thing. The more you put all that together, I find that with a greater understanding, start looking at the stuff that's in the Bible, especially, for me anyways, the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and also the book of Acts. And then Paul has some great remarks in his epistles, which is, it starts with Romans, but there are other writings, Hebrews being one of them. Philippians is another great one. When I look at those writings, once you understand what they're talking about, it's phenomenal. It is great advice, and if you take that and attempt to the best of your ability to put that into your own life, you can literally create anything you want. And that's the idea behind it. So when we talked about faith, we're not just talking about fluff. We're not just talking about a hope, a nice a fantasy, and pray to God, and God will open the doors. And no, it doesn't work like that. There are things that you need to do.
Right.
And as you do that, and as you apply those principles, then you couple with a greater presence and power. And that greater presence and power starts to flow through you. And then you create what you want.
Wow.
And the thing behind that, always, 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 is it has to work for you, and it has to work for everybody else. Okay, so
for the good of everyone.
For the good of everyone.
Yeah.
As long as you take.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, one of the things that you mentioned is that like when you put those books together, you really look at it and you try to put it in a practical aspect.
Right.
Practical, but also it takes a certain type of mindset to be able to metaphysically break that down.
Well,
you know what I mean? And so that's the purpose of you being there on Sunday. You know,
That's
I don't know
right.
if you know that or not. I think you think this stuff is just it's okay. We look at the Bible and I can just interpret it as you know, like I can pick up assurance and what's the other conviction. You know,
right.
and then zoom that into one of the 12 powers. Like I can just automatically do that. No, I can't. And that's why I go to church on Sunday, and so that you know I might hear something like that and go, oh my God, that makes sense because that's one of the 12 powers and the conviction and so we need this strength in order to create this stuff. And so
and what I have been doing for
this is not normal Bible reading. You know what I mean? This is metaphysically interpreting the Bible and applying it. You know what I mean? I mean, we read it, but then unity, we tend to metaphysically interpret it. Right.
Yeah. Well, the other thing too, again, I find great understanding and wisdom in the Bible, but I didn't always see that. Okay.
Can I say one more thing?
Sure.
You know, and the interpretation of the Bible is the interpretation of the Bible, but the metaphysical interpretation of the Bible is not.
It's a whole different ballgame.
It's a whole different ballgame, and most people, right? I mean, you have to go to school or you have to buy a book that shows you how to metaphysically interpret it, right? And I have that book.
Yeah.
And I haven't gotten through the first page. Okay. But so this is not just, you know, I just want to make it clear because I know you're like, well, I just open the Bible and but it's not that simple for us. You know, we don't take classes to metaphysically.
Well, hopefully that's something that I can share with people.
You have been. And thank you for that.
And the idea on Sunday is I will often, you know, here's the principle I want to talk about, okay? And so I'll outline what that principle is. And then I'll show some Bible verses and maybe even stories about that. And so here it is in Scripture. And then after that, by the way, here's a book that also talks about that. Here's another book that talks about that. Here's a personal story that illustrates that. And once you start putting all of that together, then people get an idea that, oh my gosh, that's how that works. That's what that Bible phrase means, at least to me. Okay? So this is what it means to me, and here's some other literature. And typically what I will do is the books that I mention, for example, Emily Cady or Charles Fillmore, I'll have those books available. So after the service, they'll be right up there on the front table, and people can come up, and they're usually either dog-eared or there's a marker in it. And if somebody said, hey, when you said this in this other book, and I'll just open it up and say, well, here it is. This is the chapter. And I mentioned two books, I think three books on Sunday. One was Emily Cady's book, and I had that up there. And then another one was Napoleon Hill's book, Think and Grow Rich, which was actually written in 1937. I mean that, and in the first printing, they wouldn't put the metaphysical stuff in there. They said, no. This is going to create too much but if you want us to publish it, we'll do it this way. And Napoleon Hill said, well, okay. So when you take a look at the recent printings of that book, you know, I forgot the actual term for that, but when they reprint it and republish it years later, you want to look for the latest revision, the latest publication, because all of that old stuff got put back in. You know?
That's a great thing. So they put that back in there.
Yeah. So, anyways, the whole idea on Sunday is, you know, how do we create a better life for ourselves?
Right.
How do we have a greater spiritual understanding? And there's a lot of different ways of looking at that. There's different spiritual laws and things. So I'll say, okay, here's what we're going to talk about. Here's some scripture. Here's some other books. Here's some personal stories to try to flush it out so that people get the idea and say, oh my gosh, that's how it can work in my life.
So give us an example of a assurance and conviction story, and I got one that you said
on
Sunday, which I thought was great.
Well, the one that I said
where someone actually practiced, they didn't just help for something, but they actually had assurance and conviction, and that's strength. So they demonstrated strength, and that made whatever it was that they wanted to come into fruition. And so you're saying that can happen. So give us an example in the Bible of that.
Well, the example that came up for me is a real life example, and many of you know that I watch the National Football League, the NFL. I like to watch football games, and one of the all-time star quarterbacks is Tom Brady, and Tom from an early kid, he idolized certain quarterbacks. He tried to, when you're out in the playing field, you usually say, okay, here I am, I'm, Brett Favre, or I'm, Joe Montana, and he idolized some of those quarterbacks. He was a college quarterback, did pretty well, okay, but when he got drafted, he was drafted absolutely last.
Wow.
Okay, by the New England Patriots, and I'm trying to remember his first name. Kraft is his last name. He's the owner of the Patriots. And he came up to Tom and kind of welcomed him to the team. And here's where assurance and conviction comes in, because Tom looked at him and said, you just made the best decision of your career.
Wow. Wow.
Just best decision you've ever made was drafting me.
Wow.
and Kraft looked at him and thought that's pretty arrogant, considering, but that's actually what Tom believed.
Yeah.
And then what happened?
That's actually what he believed.
That's what he believed. Yeah.
Yeah. And he's not just saying it because he wants something.
And he had done his homework,
right?
And he had done his, he had, he's what, 21, 22 years old, okay? But he has, 15 years?
He's practiced. He's practiced.
Not only his vision, but he has practiced, okay?
On a physical level.
And he's done some metaphysical work. Right. I mentioned, several months ago.
Ruiz.
Four Agreements.
Yeah.
He was reading.
He quoted him.
He was reading those books. So, when we talk about assurance and conviction and confidence, it's all born in a greater vision that you have for yourself, and then you do your work. You do the work of actually what's in the material world. What you need to study, you need to practice those sorts of things. But you also do your spiritual work, and the spiritual work is the visioning and the study of how all that works.
Yeah. So that's a real life example, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not going to say the Bible's not real life, but there's a bunch of stories in the Bible.
There's a bunch of them.
So give me a story of conviction and of assurance in the Bible. There was one that was really funny. We made. I think we made joke of a couple of days. Well, I think it was today we made joke of it. Today.
Okay,
but it was the one where you talked about the guy who has a servant, and he's like,
oh yeah, the centurion servant.
And he said, Jesus said, take me to your house. He said, you don't need to go to my house. You don't need to go to my house. You don't need to go to my house. All you need to do is say it's done, and it's going to be done.
That's right.
You told that story on Sunday, and I was like, wow, he's telling Jesus, you don't even need to go to my house. I believe you. I believe in you. I have faith so much that this can happen. You don't even need to come to my house. Jesus wanted to go to the house.
Right. And the way that he said it was, I am a man of authority also. Okay. And in other words, he's saying, you're a man of authority, spiritual authority. And I tell my servants, or, the people who report to him, they will do this, and the order's done. So therefore, you're a man of authority. All you need to do is say the word.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Jesus looks at him and basically says, I have never seen such faith in all of Israel. And it was done.
Wow. You mentioned something else, and this was a hard pill for me to swallow.
Okay.
When you said, Jesus is not doing the work. He's not doing, I don't know if you said that, but I heard that. And I'm not saying you said that, because I got to go back and look at the videotape to see.
Well, I can tell you what I said.
Okay, cool. Tell me what you said.
All right. In many of the healings that go on, all right, in the Bible. A person will come up to him and ask for a healing, and Jesus will say, "Do you believe?" In other words, where's your faith? And the person will answer in the affirmative, and then the healing will occur, and Jesus will look at the person and say, "Your faith has made you well." And in most of those healing situations, a person is coming to him, so Jesus is aware of it. He's involved with it. He's talking to the person. And you could, regardless of what he said, your faith has made you well. Regardless of that, Jesus had a lot to do with it. In other words, he was involved, okay? But when I told the story of the woman who had been hemorrhaging for a number of years, who came up and believed that all she had to do was touch the hem of the garment, okay? And so she touched the hem of the garment. Well, Jesus is wearing the garment.
That's the one I was talking about.
And the energy flowed through him. I mean, he's a conduit. It's kind of like a tuning fork. If you hold a tuning fork up here and it's vibrating at a certain frequency, and you bring another tuning fork close to it, this other tuning fork will start vibrating with the same frequency as this one. So when you're in the presence of a strong spiritual master, okay, and somebody comes up and believes that all I need to do is get close to that tuning fork and my vibration will heal us, that's what happened. And in the story, Jesus was not aware of who touched him. He's walking along with the disciples. There's lots of crowds around. And all of a sudden he feels his power go through him. He didn't know who it was. He didn't know what it was about. Nothing, okay? But he looked at his disciples and basically said, "Hey, wait a minute, who touched me?" And a couple of the disciples came up and they said, "Hey, there's 100 people here. How the heck do we know?" And he said, "No, wait a minute, let's figure this out." And obviously, as he starts looking around and asking questions, the woman became a little bit nervous about this and said, "Well, it was me." Okay. And then he said, "Well, daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace."
Wow.
He just wanted to know. It's incredible stuff. And one thing that I would just like to mention to our listeners, that's what happens when you hang around the right people.
I was going to say that. I was going to say, because energy is energy.
Yeah.
And if you're around, like right now, I'm high energy today.
Right.
And I see it's a little contagious. It's a little contagious. It's contagious, And if you're around, low energy, and it's like, all right, dog, that can have an effect on you. You try to keep your vibration high as possible, but I work at I've worked at places where people's vibration is not always high, like psychiatric hospitals, places like that, or homeless shelters and stuff, where people's energy level's low, and if I'm not careful, I can vibrate at a lower level. And sometimes I got to come home and bring myself back to a more.
One thing I would just like to tell people as to how that works in the real world. Let's say that you want to change jobs, or you want a certain type of job, and you go for an interview. Most people concentrate on getting an offer, and I'm not saying that's the wrong thing to do. But in that interview, you also want to get a feel for what's going on in that company. In other words, why is that opening available? How is it that, and what are you going to do? And what's the energy of the people around you? And I can tell you, I have gone on interviews in the past with some companies and said, yeah, I really want this job. I want to be involved with these people. They got something going. And I've also been on interviews where, the energy is wrong. There's, I'm feeling it. And I can tell you, I went on an interview one time, and I felt the energy was so toxic. And it was a big company, and I felt the energy was so toxic, I actually got sick a little bit later.
Wow.
I went back to my room. I had a plane flight the next day, sort of thing. But I actually got sick that night. And it wasn't from too many cocktails but it was just an energy sort of thing. So be very careful who you hang around with. One of the biggest reasons why people who go to jail come out worse
They go back to the same environment.
Well, not only that, but who are they hanging around with for 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, or whatever? Okay.
Who touched me? I mean, that's so powerful. Like you have to be careful of where you're putting what you're allowing in your circumference, what you're allowing. That's right. I had a woman call me yesterday for a job interview, and I loved her voice. And she was just like, "Oh, I'm so excited to meet you. We were looking over your resume. We really think you're going to be a good fit."
Great.
And it was just pleasant. Yeah. And I'm looking forward to going to that interview today. You're talking about jobs, so I'm looking forward to going to that interview today.
Right.
But I was interviewed a couple of days ago by some people, and the energy wasn't right. I mean, I felt like I was being interrogated in the interview. Right. And the environment, I looked around at the environment, and it was very cluttered. It was I was like, no, this is not the place for me. Right. I mean, I felt like I did really well in the interview. Right. And I'm sure, and this is not arrogance, this is just conviction.
Right.
I'm just demonstrating one of my, 12 strength, conviction. Right. I'm sure I'm going to get an offer. But I'm just not interested, just because of the environment was very I just felt that the energy wasn't right. So you're right about that. Yeah. We have to pay attention to that stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You've got to go to where it feels right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's two things involved. Number one is your conscious way of looking at it, and then the other thing is the feeling. All of that's got to work. And again, I just want to strongly reiterate: go where it feels right.
Wow.
Okay.
Wow.
And hang out with people who,
well, what we say? What do we say? Where you're being fed? I like that.
That's good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Spiritually, well, no, you don't have to hang around people that's spiritually feeding you, but that's good to hang around people that's spiritually feeding you, but also be in environments that's conducive to where you're trying to go and what you're trying to be.
That's right.
Yeah.
Hang out with people who've got what you want.
Yeah.
And so you can learn from them. And in the same token, as you bring your gifts, then 1 and 1 is 3.
Right.
2 and 2 is 10.
Yeah.
They just complement and build on each other. So that's kind of what you want to do. And faith is a big part of that.
That's true. Sometimes you say things and it makes me remember, my past, and you said 1 and 1 makes 2, and 2 and 1 makes 3. And it's interesting because it's not just putting yourself in those I've put myself in environments where I felt would help me, but people weren't interested in giving in helping. Right. So it was just 1. I was interested in giving my talent, right? But they weren't interested in my talent, and they weren't interested in helping. So it was I could see that they could help me, but they just weren't interested. So it has to be a good exchange, right?
And it doesn't necessarily have to be a helping relationship. In other words, you can go in and you can observe other people, and you can see the level of skill that they have, and you can see how they do it. And that oftentimes is enough.
Yeah, right.
That oftentimes can be just enough.
Yeah.
It's being in the right place at the right time. And if your focus and your prayer life and everything else is going in that direction, those opportunities, those doors will open for you.
And now you don't have to expect them to give anything. Just the fact that you're around them and that they're vibrating at energy, you're going to get something from it.
Yeah, and at the same time, as you take a look and say, wait a minute, I've got gifts too. Now let's say there's a group of people there and they're doing great things, and you come up to them and say, hey, I want to play. Right. Where can I help?
Right.
And in any group of people, if somebody comes up and said, what can I do to help? You're going to find something, and pretty soon you're part of the group. You do those things well, and then you just grow with them. It can, the opposite can also happen. If you're a stick in the mud, and I can just tell you, we had an example in one of the plants that I was running, where I went into this one department. It was a shipping department, and the guy who was running it was just a stick in the mud. He was always crabbing and complaining. He was always telling me, why it wouldn't work, on and on and on and on and on. So, we finally said, look, this ain't working. You and I are on this. Okay, so don't worry about your pay. Okay, your pay's going to stay the same, but we're going to put you over in this department, and that guy's kind of positive, and just do the best you can. Don't worry about your pay, all benefits and things, but you're not the lead guy over here anymore, and we put somebody else in charge. And so, and he was a curmudgeon in the other department too. Finally, the group leader of that came up and said, hey, you got someplace else we can put this guy, because he's a downer for everybody. So, again, surround yourself with people who are positive, skillful, going in the direction that you want to go, and then you can just, I mean, a rising tide raises all the ships.
Wow.
You know, that sort of thing.
Before we end, I want to ask you a question, and I haven't, you know, this is just you answer it if you want to.
Okay.
What is a sign for a reverend that his sermons or that his talks are having a positive effect on his congregant's life? What is it? What is it like? Do you guys gauge that stuff? Like well, you know, like is my question, is it clear to you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Typically, the way I look at it is, you know, what do people say afterwards? And so far, people have come up. They say, "Wow, where was that quote?" They're interested in the books that are on the table, or they'll say something. Okay. Now, years ago, in a much larger congregation, I would step in the back, and after the last benediction, I'd just greet everybody as they kind of went by. And, you know, a lot of people would say something nice, and you said, well, okay. Every now and then somebody would say, that was the worst thing I ever heard in my life, you know, you're full of crap, or whatever it is. That would tend to stick with you. And so I would ask questions, and I often ask questions, you know, from the board people and from other people. Simply, what else would you like me to talk about? Okay, what other things are on your mind? Those sorts of things. And so, if somebody makes a suggestion, I'll do some research and I'll talk about that. So yeah. So I think one of the key things is, what kind of feedback do you get? You know, if nobody ever says anything and people are starting to look the other way and all that, you know that you haven't connected.
Yeah. One of the things that, you know, like in work that I do, when I'm like assessing clients and when I'm looking to see if the work that I'm doing with them is helping them, I look at, have their lives improved at all?
Right.
You know, has their coping mechanisms gotten better? Have they, you know, if they gain any coping mechanisms and stuff like that? And so I was wondering if you guys kind of look out at the audience and see, well, you know what, it looks like, you know, well, Shannon's gotten married. He wasn't married before, or, you know, he's got a new car now, or he's you know.
I usually wait or judge that by the feedback that I get, and I'll often ask people, you know, what's changed. And after a while, and the time is getting to be about right. I want to be in it for about, you know, at least 6 months to a year, and then you start asking people, hey, how would you like to? Especially the ones that come every Sunday, they seem to be excited, and they're starting to take part. And I'm going to talk about that this coming Sunday as to what's involved with that. But when you see people starting to step up, where the church has made a difference in their lives, then at some point I usually talk to them and say, you know, you've been here for 2 months, or you've been here for 6 months, or you've been here for 2 years. You're starting to step up. You're doing these things. Would you be willing to 3 minutes or 4 minutes on a Sunday, if I gave you the microphone, just say how things have changed for you? Or I'll ask them privately, you know, how are things going, or, you know, it looks like a change has been made. Tell me about that, and see what they say.
Yeah, I've gotten a lot of feedback from people at church, and I've heard that their lives have gotten better and improved.
Well, that's good.
Yeah,
that's good.
And so,
you know,
I just wanted to know if you guys have your own gauging mechanism to see if what you're doing is working. You know what I mean?
Nothing more than
Then what I guess.
Yeah, that's obvious. But I will tell you one thing. We had something happen on Sunday that told me, and that was when people who were watching on Facebook actually sent in a prayer request. You know, on the phone, and you gave me the phone, and we did a prayer for them.
Yeah, that was very powerful.
Right there.
Yeah.
I thought that was great.
Yeah.
So people are listening.
They're listening, and we're growing as a church.
And
so
it's making a difference in their life.
It's making a difference, man. I think that's what's most important. You know, that's why I come.
That's why we do it.
Yeah.
You know, that's the whole idea. Yeah.
Doug, we are out of time again. We're out of time. But we have something going on tonight. If they want to continue watching, we got something going on tonight. You want to tell them a little bit about that?
It's a prayer class, and it's at 6:30. So you want to contact our administrator Penny pretty quick, so she can send you a link to that. But it's at 6:30, and it's the third in a series. And so far, I've simply asked people, what would you like to know about prayer? And we've discussed, praying for other people. And tonight, we're going to, based on the request from last week, tonight we're going to talk about grief and loss. In other words, how do we be with people? What kind of prayers do you say? We're going to talk about grief and loss. That was a request from last week. And we're also going to talk a little bit about personal prayer, because so far it's been directed towards praying with others. And so tonight it's going to be about grief and loss, and it's also going to be about personal prayer.
This is an opportunity for people to come out and learn how we pray at Unity.
Right. It's called affirmative prayer.
Affirmative prayer. How we pray, and there's steps to it. You know, it's not a regular kind of prayer thing where you just kind of say, "Hey, God, help me get out of this one." It's some steps to it.
And I'll be good.
And I'll be good next time. I won't do it again. Yeah. It's not that kind of prayer. And so and when I learned it, it was powerful. And I've been using it ever since, and it's made a difference in my life. So I invite our viewers to come out. And the people that are online that don't get a chance to come to our church service, you're welcome to join us tonight at I'm going to just reiterate it again real quick. 6:30. And the email address is on your on the screen right now. You just send us your name and your number, your email address.
And we'll send you a link.
Yeah, and it'll be a Zoom link.
Yeah. And the other thing too, it's interactive, so it's not like it's a total lecture. The very first one was but last week it's very interactive. So if you have questions, you can just raise your hand and ask a question. I'll field them to the best that I can. Yeah. And sometimes we break out in small groups. Yeah. Where you can talk with other people. Yeah.
And we put you on the spot last week. We asked you to do a few prayers on the instant, but we always ask you to do prayers on the instant, and you just seem to spit them out.
Well, here's the thing.
But you've been doing it since the 1800s, right? No, I'm joking.
Yeah, right. I didn't write the tablets for Moses. Okay.
Oh, right.
But when I was in ministerial school, this was 20 years ago, but basically the ordination process then was you had to be at the village for 2 years. Yeah. Wow. And they had a series of classes and everything that you went through. But you were resident. And Silent Unity was there, which is our telephone prayer ministry, and I worked in Silent Unity for 2 years, 3 nights a week, 8-hour shifts, and every shift I would do somewhere between 40 and 70 prayers, depending on, usually it was around 50, depending on, the activity level of it and the day of the week and that sort of thing. So after a while, that sort of practice,
you could just do it in a minute. Yeah.
You kind of understand, how that goes. And I also have a personal prayer and meditation practice myself. So, and that's what I encourage other people to do. In other words, here's how you do it. But you got to do it. You got to. Yeah.
So also, if you are in need of prayer, you're welcome to send us an email, and we'll definitely pray for you. And we can do that online on Sunday. live, or we can just kind of maybe, what would we do if someone emailed us? Would you write them a prayer or something like that? Yeah,
send me an email, we'll respond, with that.
With email, yeah.
And one other thing that I would recommend is just simply, if you have a prayer request, you can send it to us, and I'd be happy to do that, or call Silent Unity.
Let me put that up. Go ahead.
And then Shannon will put the number on the screen, but just call Silent Unity. It's a free call, and you will get somebody on the phone who will be very connected with you, and it'll be short. It won't be very long. Maybe it's total maybe 5 minutes, something like that. Yeah. And I guarantee you, it's well worth a call. I've called Silent Unity myself several times, and it's always a comforting experience.
You've directed us to call.
Yeah.
You said, hey, the class that we're having tonight, you were like, you need to call. That's the part of your homework. And I've never called Silent Unity. That's because I got you. No, but I need to call, and because that's a good resource to have. It's just a good resource to have. Yeah. And so I'm definitely going to do that before tonight. So I can make sure I get my homework done.
Well, here's something that I'd recommend for you. If you're going on an interview this afternoon, when we're all done with this,
we'll do it.
Call Silent Unity.
Okay, cool.
Call Silent Unity.
Oh my God, that's great. I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
I'm going to do it. That's a great recommendation. Thank you, Doug. Thank you for that.
It's all right.
Yeah. Tomorrow we got our Spiritual Connection group.
Yep, Thursday night at Whole Foods. And I think that's at, 6 o'clock?
Is that 6 or 6:30?
6 o'clock, I think it is.
Well, let me pull up the
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's at 6.
Tell them about the Spiritual Connection group, Doug. It's a time for us to get together.
Well, it's at Whole Foods. It's upstairs, and it's just an opportunity for people to get together or ask any questions or just tell stories or whatever comes up. It's pretty much just a time for us to get together and be with each other. And whatever comes up, comes up. Sometimes people ask questions. Sometimes we just sit there and talk, And it's a time to share, and some of those times have been great. It runs from about 6 to 7. Yeah, and it's a good time.
Yeah, it is at 6 o'clock. Yeah. So that's on Thursday night. We're gonna do that tomorrow night.
Right.
Looking forward to that. And it's just light conversation.
And one thing I'd recommend. The space is free, but Whole Foods also sells all kinds of food. They have delis and other sorts of things. So I'd recommend that you come and grab something from downstairs just to
don't look like a freeloader.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. I used to get pizza. I love the pizza.
Yeah.
You ever got the pizza?
I've gotten it before.
Yeah, pretty good. Yeah. And then of course on Sunday at 10:30 we have our Dancing with Spirit.
Right, Laura does that. Yeah, and
you want to tell them a little bit about that, Doug?
Well, it's kind of a walking, maybe not walking, but it's a meditation time, and it's a physical time. And typically, what happens is people just kind of gather around. Laura has some music, and then she talks, and she goes through a number of physical exercises, and it's just a good time. It's a time to kind of relax and open up, and we laugh and get to know one another, and then we go into the service. There's about a 15-minute break there, and then we have the service. Yeah. It's kind of a nice icebreaker for a lot of people.
I think so. I've seen a difference in our socialization, and also I've seen a difference in Landis's music. And I've also seen a difference in your presentation as a result of this whole dancing, spiritual opening up.
I think it loosens everybody up.
Yeah, it does. It does. It's kind of like when you go to you have choir rehearsal and you have to go la 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 si la. You do those numbers for a minute to kind of open up the vocal cords.
Right.
This is kind of
maybe you do that. I have. Let's put it this way. I was in 6th grade, right, in my Presbyterian church, and I wanted to be in the choir. And finally, the choir master said, "Wait, stop. Somebody is way up.
Right.
You
get out of here."
Yeah. That was me.
That was so you're just not doing that.
Yeah, so I don't do that. But I can do the physical exercise.
Right. Yeah. So that's on Sunday at 10:30, and so you can always come out to that ahead of time and get that before the service.
Right.
And then we have a potluck at the end. Well, not really potluck, but sometimes we have.
There's always food.
There's always food. Yeah.
Always food, and it's a time not only to get some food, but
socialize a little bit.
Yeah, pick a table, sit down, talk with people, get to know one another, that sort of thing.
I usually go to each table and try to get a little, say hello to everybody.
And this coming Sunday, our hours are extended a little bit. We're going to go till 2:00, and Mona is going to be doing their homeless outreach, and we've got some things some sandwiches to make up. And then everybody's going to go down and give those out at the homeless shelter. Yeah. So that's this coming.
Yeah, I just put that announcement up. So they're going to be giving out we're going to be packing up lunches and stuff like that. And we're going to put those bags together as far as the
things to hand out.
Yeah, hand out. Yeah, stuff that we got. Mm-hmm. So that should be really nice. We've been doing a lot of stuff in the community lately.
We have.
Yeah.
We have.
And I like that. I like that we've been engaged in the community. That's a wonderful thing. Doug, I think that's about all the time we got.
Yep, it's been good.
I'm going to call Silent Unity. I want to thank you guys for joining us. If this has been a blessing to you, feel free to pass this podcast on to someone else.
Tell your friends.
Yeah.
And this is kind of an informal thing. Usually Sundays my talks are scripted and a little more prepared, but this is whatever comes up, and Thursday nights the same way.
Yeah. I try to keep them off script when we're here. But it was nice to have you back again, Doug.
Thanks.
I love you. I'll talk to you later.
Okay.
Bye, guys.
See ya.